Metro News, the voice of West Virginia, presents The Blitz, a weekly breakdown of high school football throughout the Mountain State. Now, here's your host, Garrett, Cullen.
And across the state of West Virginia, online at WVMetroNews.com, another edition of The Blitz as we head into the Super 6 for 2015 from Wheeling Island Stadium. The three championship games are set on Friday night. Bridgeport will face Tulsa. Saturday at noon, it'll be Wheeling Park against Capital, and Saturday night at 7 o'clock, Magnolia facing East Hardy for the Single A state championship. Let's welcome in the voice of high school sports throughout the state of West Virginia, Fred Persinger. And Fred, we've got some pretty good matchups here, all three classes.
I think we have some fabulous matchups. I really do. I think, and I know this sounds bad, but I think with Cabell Midland getting eliminated, the way they had really been playing so well, I think the AAA game now really gets interesting with the two teams we have there. And I think the same thing with Friday night's game. And certainly when you get 1 and 2 in Single A, you got to have a good game there. So everything really shapes up for three very good football games this weekend.
Yeah, and that Cabell Midland Capital game, maybe it was a surprise when that final score came through to a lot of people, but should we have been surprised? I mean, I think back to Capital and Cabell Midland in the regular season, just a 7-point game, and from that point on, all the talk was around Cabell Midland, and you almost forgot about Capital a little bit. They had some injuries, lost to George Washington, and you thought, okay, they're going through some struggles here, but Tyree Pratt has just been fantastic in the playoffs, in the postseason. He's gotten healthy again. I looked back at our poll that we put out on our Metro News Prep Twitter account, who would win that game between Cabell Midland and Capital. Somewhere around, it was over 80% picked Cabell Midland for that game. So they were being looked at as the heavy underdog. And tell you what, the Cougars, they play with an extra chip on their shoulder when they're in that underdog role, and they look like the defending state champs back on Saturday.
Yeah, I think all the talk about Cabell Midland put a 2x4 on their shoulder, to be honest with you. You know, someone asked me last week, though, what I thought about the Cabell Midland game. And I said, if Cabell Midland played the same way they did against Brooke, and trust me, that was not a 30-7 ball game. Brooke played them much closer than that. And if Capital played the way they did against Martinsburg, then I don't think you could just say Cabell Midland was going to win. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Tyree Pratt jumped early, jumped often, and Cabell Midland was out of the game, 35-13, and I don't even think it was that close, to be honest with you. So congrats to Capital. They're coming back and trying to do what the last 4 state champions have done, and that's repeat at least one time. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Pratt individually has put together impressive back-to-back efforts in postseason play, and potentially creating a shakeup when you want to go Player of the Year awards and all of that discussion. I think he's thrown himself right back in there at the top of that mix for Player of the Year awards, the Kennedy Award. You think back to just 2 weeks ago in the quarterfinals, he had 208 yards rushing, threw for another 105 yards in that game. Back against Cabell Midland on Saturday, 155 yards rushing, accounted for 5 total touchdowns, 3 of those on the ground, 2 of those through the air. And Pratt was asked after the game, was this a statement game for you individually?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to get these awards. I'm trying to let them know what I can do out here and what I can do against big-time teams.
And he was also asked just about getting back to Wheeling, 2nd year in a row, and the Cougars will have a chance to defend their title.
That's the main goal at the beginning of the season. That's what we work for all year. That's what we practice for. And it's going back to Wheeling. It's round 2 again. And
Fred, he battled through an injury there, a shoulder injury, and at the end of the regular season, and now is looking back to his old self. I think there should be, when you go to those postseason awards, some credit given to play late in the season, to play in the semifinals and in the championship game as well, and we're seeing that from him.
Yeah, you don't select the awards before the season's over with, and for 6 teams, the season is not over with. You know, we talked about Cabell Midland, and we've talked about Capital, and Capital having a chip on their shoulder because everyone was talking about Capital. I'm not so sure that John Carpenter and Capital wasn't talking more about Silas Nazario than they were about Tyree Pratt. So Silas Nazario gets hurt with that ankle injury. Now all of a sudden it's Tyree Pratt's ball club again, and he proved what he can do. So those things work both ways. I'm sure John Carpenter is hoping this Saturday afternoon he has Silas back at full strength, and that will just make them better. Certainly the way Tyree Pratt's playing now, you get both of those kids in there playing well, then I think you really got something that's going to be tough to stop.
Let's go to that other side of the AAA bracket, talking about a team that's been tough to stop, and that's Wheeling Park. 35-14 win over Point Pleasant. Point Pleasant scoring one of those touchdowns in the final 10 seconds. So just a dominant road win for the Patriots. Cross Wilkinson threw for 219 yards. He had 4 touchdowns. Savion Johnson, 180 yards on 30 carries. Elijah Bell has added 108 receiving yards and 2 scores in that game on 4 catches. He's a guy that's been getting some buzz as well as one of the best players in the state, not only at receiver but defensively as well. So this is the first trip to the state championship game for Wheeling Park since 1991. That was a 15-14 loss to Capital back when the title games were played at Laidley Field in Charleston. So it's going to be the first chance for Wheeling Park to play on its home turf in front of the home crowd in a state title game. And we talked with Wheeling Park coach Chris Doherty just about making that happen and the opportunity that's coming up for them at home.
Our kids have always talked about trying to play in a state championship at our home field, and you don't know how long the state championship will be in your hometown, and that process could change. And it was important for our kids. They've talked about it. People talk about it a lot back our way. And, now we're getting an opportunity. They've done everything we've asked them to do. And now we're there. So, but we can't be complacent. The goal isn't just to get to a state championship. The goal is to win one.
All right, so that's Coach Doherty. That was on game night after the win over Point Pleasant. And we talk about all their offensive weapons, Fred, but what they were able to do to Point Pleasant, from Wheeling Park's defensive standpoint, was terrific, and holding Cody Mitchell to just 27 yards in the first half. Now we got some more there later in the second half when the game was well in hand, but I think Wheeling Park has proven it's a complete team, not only on all levels offensively, but defensively as well.
No question. And you look at their playoff run, they beat number 14 Spring Valley, number 11 South Charleston, when South Charleston was playing as good as anyone in the state, and they knock off number 2 Point Pleasant. They're averaging 39 points a game through those 3 games, and they're averaging giving up only 9 points a game. I think that says a lot about their offense, as you mentioned, with Cross Wilkinson and Savion Johnson and that crew, but that says more for me about the defense and the way they're playing, and they're certainly going to have to rely on that defense against Tyree Pratt and the Capital Cougars.
All right, so the Class AAA title game coming up on Saturday with a noon kickoff from Wheeling Island Stadium, and you would expect just a huge crowd in there for that one. Let's go to AA now, where that title game is coming up on Friday night at 7:30. You've got the 2-time defending state champion Bridgeport Indians at 12-0-1 on the year against number 3 Tulsa. Tulsa coming in at 12-1, and you look back to what these two teams did last week. Tulsa beats Mingo Central 22-0. Bridgeport over Fairmont Senior 28-20. I want to talk about Bridgeport in just a second, but let's start with Tulsa. The Rebels into the title game for the first time since 2006. That was when they lost to Wayne 33-6. So it's been a while for the Rebels, but what they've done defensively in these playoffs has been really impressive, giving up just 6 points that came in the opening round. They've had back-to-back shutouts, including that win over Mingo Central. And I know Mingo Central lost their quarterback, Stevie Hammond, in the first half, didn't have him the rest of the way, but I don't think it would have mattered. Tulsa just was so dominant, and we talked with Mike Smith, Tulsa's head coach, after the game, just on that dominant defense.
Yeah, our defense has played really well through these playoffs. We've given up 6 points, and they showed up and played well again. And I think we got an early start on them. We scored on the first possession, and I think it kind of took the wind out of their sails a little bit.
All right, here's another guy who's right into that player of the year mix, and I think a big showing for him, a potential upset. If Tulsa could get the upset of Bridgeport, he throws himself right up to the top of the player of the year discussion. And Luke Presley, not only what he's done offensively at running back, but defensively as well. And he talks about that Tulsa defense.
The film, a lot of practice. We changed up a lot of things, moved some people around, a lot of things to our defense to get it where it needs to be, and it's looking great right now. Hard-hitting defense.
So Presley in the win over Mingo Central, 142 rushing yards, a touchdown on 22 carries.
It was real special night. Got real emotional after the game. I mean, it's what we live for out here.
And Fred, he's a hard-nosed player, not only as a running back, he'll hit you in the mouth, but he's had some pretty good hits as well defensively.
Well, on our website, if you see the highlights, I mean, I know Stevie Hammond is still thinking about the hit he took from Luke Presley. I mean, that was just an amazing, amazing ball game. And, you know, we talked about how Wheeling Park is scoring and not allowing teams to score. And Mike Smith hit it on the head. The defense is amazing. They're outscoring their three opponents in the playoffs 38-2. And he told me when I talked with him in Parkersburg at the meetings this past Sunday, I said, what is the key? What is the key to your team? He said, defensively, if anybody wants to run on us, that's a huge mistake because we stop the run. And what does Bridgeport do? They run.
They run the football, Fred.
Should be a great football game Friday night. It really should.
Yeah, and speaking of Bridgeport, looking at what they had to get through in Fairmont Senior in those semifinals, and they were able to do it with their defense. We talked about the first time around, Fairmont Senior had all those red zone turnovers against Bridgeport. You can't do that. Well, early in the game, they had another red zone turnover, drove all the way to the 1 yard line of Bridgeport, had a bad snap, bobbled snap. Bridgeport recovers, and they turned that thing around to get the key turnover there. They also had 2 pick sixes, so 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns. Luke Southern had a 50-yard pick six in the third quarter that gave Bridgeport a 14-0 lead. Elijah Drummond, a 15-yard pick six with under 5 minutes to go. That gave the Indians a 28-14 cushion, ultimately a 28-20 win. So we talked with Indians head coach Josh Nicewarner on the defense stepping up when it was needed against Fairmont Senior.
These kids are fighters, and that that's a testament to the 17 seniors we have on this team. But they bail each other out because I think 8 of the 11 are playing both ways. So the lack of production on offense was certainly picked up on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, so Bridgeport trying to win a 3rd straight title. You think back just a couple of years ago, Fred, it was Wayne looking for that 3rd straight title, and Bridgeport won a tight game over the Pioneers to capture the first of their 2 in a row. And we talked with Dante Bonamico, one of the Bridgeport's running backs, on what a 3rd title would mean for the Indians.
Oh, it'd be unbelievable. And to do it with this group of guys for 3 years now is just awesome. And it means a lot to the city, a lot to our school, and a lot to our football program to three-peat. And it's I can't even put it into words.
All right, so I think there's all kinds of storylines in this one, Fred. You've got the team that's going for a 3rd straight title, the underdog team coming in that's led by a dominant player on both sides of the ball. The first time they've been there in a while, but they've had a terrific season as well. And just a whole bunch of different angles you could take out of this AA game.
Yeah, no question. You talk about a three-peat for Bridgeport. Only one other team's ever been able to do that in Class AA. That was the Polka Dots in 2001, 2002, and 2003. No one else had. A lot of teams that's had 2 in a row, even going back as far as Sarita Canova. But still, Polka only team that's been able to do 3 in a row. Bridgeport has an opportunity. I think most folks would think certainly Bridgeport is the favorite, but I'm telling you, just talking with the head coach, talking with Luke Presley, Tulsa's believing. They think they'll go up there and win, and we'll just have to wait till Friday night to find out. But you're right. You can expect a really, really good football game. I have never seen Josh Nicewarner quite as upset as I saw him Sunday in those meetings in Parkersburg. He was not happy with his ball club at all, and he said, I know it's tough to beat a team twice, and he said Fairmont Senior had really, really improved, he said, but still. He said, my kids, they better take some learning out of that or they'll not three-peat. So he was not happy after the team's performance Friday night.
All right, so that's the Friday night game, 7:30, Bridgeport against Tulsa. Let's jump to Single A now, where that's coming up on Saturday night. A 7 o'clock kickoff. Number 1 Magnolia at 13-0 facing number 2 East Hardy coming in at 12-1. Magnolia at 13-7 win over Moorfield in the semifinals. East Hardy beat St. Mary's 36-19. Let's start with the Cougars. They led in that game 17-7 at the half and pulled away even more in the second half. Forced 7 total turnovers in the game, so they turned St. Mary's over 7 times. It's the first trip to the state championship game for East Hardy, and we've talked about their quarterback, Corey McDonald, several times. 402 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. He picked off 2 passes defensively as well for East Hardy in that win. Some playmakers for them other than McDonald. Brett Tharp certainly should be mentioned. 11 catches, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. Bryce Strotterman as well. He had 4 catches for 101 yards receiving. So Chad Williams, East Hardy head football coach, just talked about his team getting into that title game, the first opportunity here to win a football state championship.
This is where I hope to be. I said at the start of the year I thought this was the best team we've ever had. We were very fortunate the last 2 years to make the playoffs and to make the quarterfinals and do what we did, because the juniors and seniors that are out there now, a lot of them were starting as freshmen and sophomores on those teams. So, I thought if we were ever going to do it, this would be the year that we were going to make it here. But, now that we're here, it's a pretty amazing feeling.
And, Fred, it's kind of been fun to watch that East Hardy program come along, hasn't it? They've made a couple of runs into the playoffs and now finally breaking through to get to that championship game.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long this single-A game is going to last Saturday night, because Chad Williams is a ball club, as you were talking about, Corey McDonald, and how many times he throws. They like to throw about 40 times a game. When's the last time you saw a single-A football team throw the ball that much? Like, you have to go all the way back to those Moorfield teams when they were winning all the time. They had some great quarterbacks going through that run. But Chad Williams is an outstanding young coach. I asked him what he was going to do right before the game Saturday night, and he said, I hope this doesn't sound bad. He said, but honestly, I'll probably just throw up because I'm going to be so nervous. And I mean, that's just his honest opinion of the thing. So, yeah, they're excited, but he said, hey, we're not going up there just to play. We're going up there to win. And no one's been able to do that so far this season against a very good Josh Sims ball club in Magnolia.
Yeah, and Magnolia's had to win a couple of tight games. East Hardy has certainly those early rounds of the playoffs last week a little more comfortable against St. Mary's. Magnolia's had some tight games, especially last week, beating Moorfield 13-7. That was a 13-0 game. The Blue Eagles had the lead in the fourth quarter. Will Schoonover for Moorfield, a 55-yard touchdown run that tightened that gap to 13-7. And then they had to come up with a defensive stand as well, as Moorfield was down to the 20-yard line in the final minute. They had a last-second throw towards the end zone that was picked off and ends the game, sends Magnolia into that title game. And they've had a couple of close misses. You want to go back to 2012, they lost in a last-second field goal. 2013, they lost as well in both of those games in the semifinals, and now breaking through for the first time since their 2010 run when they won the state championship out of Class AA. So some notes on Magnolia out of that game against Moorfield. 152 yards for Tyler Anderson on 14 carries. Nick Preem had touchdown runs. He scored 1 yard and 2 yards out. Let's go ahead and hear from Magnolia coach Josh Sims on getting back to the title game. What's been the difference from last year's season to where his team is at this year?
It's kind of hard to say you expect to go undefeated and have a season like this, but I knew we had a chance to do something very special, and we talked about it a ton with the kids on that. I think the main thing we were concerned about, or we thought was the X factor of how we would do, is how much they'd buy into the team concept, be selfless rather than selfish, which, a lot of times, especially in athletics nowadays, that's harder to do than it may seem. Like I said, the main thing we wanted to focus on was being a full team, spreading the ball around, creating role players. I think we have, and I think that's been the difference.
All right, Fred, I'm going to give you some stats here from some of these Magnolia leaders statistically, and I'll let you jump in. But Nick Preem, their quarterback, 1,372 yards. He's got 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 7 rushing touchdowns. Tyler Anderson, 1,585 yards, 19 scores. He's approaching 3,000 yards for his career. He's at just over 2,800 right now. Chase Street, 1,488 yards, 15 touchdowns for him. Kyle Ritz, 23 catches, 362 yards, 5 scores. And then a young sophomore for him. He's been a nice playmaker all year. And Brooks Parsons, 12 catches for 386 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's a Magnolia team that clearly can't key in just on one guy because they've got a whole bunch of guys that can make plays.
Yeah, but as you mentioned earlier, it all starts with Nick Preem. I mean, he's got to have a normal game. A normal game for him will probably keep Magnolia undefeated, and that's what Josh Sims looks at. He knows that Nick Preem is his leader out there. He's his leader on and off the field in the locker room, and if Nick Preem has a good game, but I'm telling you, against this East Hardy defense, that's not going to be easy. And the good thing about this single-A matchup, both these teams, as you mentioned, Garrett, have been tournament tested already. In these first 3 rounds, man, they've had some great games. So I think they're both ready to go, and quite possibly, we've talked about the other 2 games, we may be saving the very best game for last, and seemingly in single A, we always do that at Wheeling Island. Last year, if you remember, it was a triple overtime win. So if we save the best game for last with what we've talked about on these other two games, then it's going to be a very, very fun weekend on the island.
Yeah, it definitely will be a fun weekend. Starting on Friday night, Saturday as well, we'll have live streaming of the Metro News radio coverage, wvmetronews.com. The link will be at the top when we go on air. We'll also have several other things going on at the website, complete coverage, video highlights, photos, the whole deal. That's all at the website, wvmetronews.com. And Fred, we'll talk again next week to recap the Super Six, and then we'll move on to basketball, but get through this weekend first.
Look forward to it, buddy.
All right, for Fred Persinger, I'm Garrett Cullen. Thanks for watching another edition of The Blitz.